Good morning. Happy hump day. So, the stuff that you're probably tuning in for is the Cordova versus Hinault. Hinault filed a motion to dismiss for forum nonconvenience and for a bond. Quick analysis. Without having seen any of Cordova's oppositions to this is just a initial likelihood kind of analysis, subject to change, because again, I haven't seen any opposition filed. I think the odds of success on the forum nonconvenience, the motion to dismiss for forum nonconvenience, has a very low probability of success. Forum nonconvenience basically is where the court finds that it would make a whole lot more sense to bring the action in a foreign country than in the U.S. So they dismiss so the plaintiff can refile in another country. Or if it's in a state court, forum nonconvenience would be where a state dismisses, like if there's a injury accident in New York, and the driver that was at fault in the injury accident in New York is a California citizen, and the New York plaintiff sues in California because that's where the defendant lives. So, it's appropriate to sue there. So the venue is technically correct. The jurisdiction is technically there. But all of the witnesses to the accident are in New York. The accident happened in New York. It's going to use New York law. California really doesn't have much interest in it. And so California might say, well, I'm going to dismiss it here so you can sue in New York where it's more appropriate. That's kind of what the courts are going to look at. There's a Supreme Court case. I haven't looked at it since law school. So if I get any of this wrong, great. You could tell me how much smarter you are than I am by looking it up and telling me the minutia of details. But again, I'm not really worried about the minutia of details. I'm worried about the overarching legal principles. There was a plane accident that happened in Scotland. I want to say it's like Piper versus Reynolds, but again, I haven't looked at this since law school, which was a long ass time ago. U.S. Supreme Court case. The plane was owned by some country or maybe I think it was UK owned plane. The accident happened in Scotland. All of the evidence was in Scotland of the accident. I believe the crew and the passengers were all UK citizens or non-US citizens. And somehow they managed to get it into, I think it was state court in California, because California had better recovery options for the plaintiff. And somehow it made its way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court was like, look, there's just not a sufficient nexus. This is really a Scottish case. Like, this should be brought in Scotland, because that's where everything is. I think the plane was manufactured in the U.S. But basically everything was in Scotland. All the evidence was in Scotland. It was going to use Scottish law. The victims, or the people who died in the crash, were all non-U.S. citizens, as far as I remember. So there just wasn't a sufficient reason. Like, the U.S. or California, whichever, didn't have it really didn't involve us. So why are our courts going to be dealing with this? In the Cordova versus Hinault case, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So I think it's a very low probability of success, because you've got a U.S. plaintiff, you've got a target audience that was in the U.S. The takedown notices and everything were for U.S. He consented to you, and I understand there's a difference between consenting to the jurisdiction and forum nonconvenience, but that's still going to come into play. The company that was hosting the videos is a U.S. company. It's U.S. copyright law. I mean, the U.S. has a lot of interest in this. So I think that's a very low probability of success. The other one, the bond, it's California, I don't remember if it's Civil Code or Code of Civil Procedure, 1030. I think that's Code of Civil Procedure. I could be wrong. Again, you could tell me how you're smarter than a first-year family law attorney by actually looking it up, going back to the pleading and looking up the statute. But that one has a more significant chance of success based on whether or not the court finds that Hinault has a reasonable chance of success on the merits, and that is a very good play. That's a good procedural move by Lou. And yes, I understand that his name is not Lou, it's Lynn, but it really pisses off Hinault's supporters, and it invalidates everything I say, so they can completely ignore this video because I got the name of Hinault's attorney wrong. So I'm going to continue calling him Lou in this video and in every video in the future, simply because it pisses off fraud control supporters. So anyway, Lou seems very competent. This is a very shrewd move on his part, entirely unexpected by me. I didn't see this coming. This is a good move. This is going to put a lot of additional pressure on Cordova to settle. So excellent move by Lou. Again, without seeing any response by Randy, I'm not going to waste my time in researching it because I really don't care that much. But without seeing anything from Randy, I think that Cordova should worry about this. And, just in general, settlement is a way better option for both Hinault and for Cordova. It's a way better option than rolling the dice and gambling. You never know what a judge or a jury is going to come back with. You just don't. It is a gamble. You could give, as if you're the attorney in the matter and you've looked at all the evidence, you understand your positions and all the cases and laws that support your position, you can give it pretty good probabilities of success, but you never know. First of all, judges and juries can make mistakes. They do. That's why cases get overturned. It's not often, but there is a probability of it, and you have to accept that. In addition, there are oftentimes competing facts or competing considerations in the law that you might value higher when on one side or the other when you're doing your analysis that the court or the jury might value differently. I was after a probate hearing the other day, I overheard an attorney explaining to his clients that the judge was dead wrong. Now, I had heard the oral arguments on that particular issue, and I thought the attorney had very good arguments. I thought he had very good arguments. I don't think the attorney made any mistakes, but the judge looked at the facts and the law a little bit differently. The judge put a little more weight on some facts, apparently, or some law, apparently, than the attorney did, and came to a different conclusion. So it's always a gamble to go to trial. It's always a gamble to leave the result in the hands of a third party. So I almost always, 99% of the time, recommend settlement. Try to get this case settled. See if we can't come to something. The results of a settlement, mediated or in a settlement conference, are basically in your control. You are the person, or your client technically is the person, the plaintiff or the defendant is the person who makes the offer or accepts the offer. So any offer that's made and accepted is agreeable to by the parties. It's a mutually agreeable compromise, and you're in some control over it. Once you get into court, you lose control over it because, again, the judge and the jury, they can make mistakes. They could look at things a little bit differently. You lose control. So it's usually better to settle. And so, again, at the upcoming settlement conference, Cordova, at this point, I think he should really be hoping that he gets to the settlement conference before the judge makes any ruling on this particular motion. But at that settlement conference, again, it is almost certainly in Cordova's best interest to settle. Almost certainly. It is almost certainly in fraud or troll's best interest to settle. And you won't know if it's not in your best interest until you roll the dice and you get to trial and a verdict comes back in your favor or against you. That's the only time you'll know if settlement wasn't in your best interest. So I mean, you just really taking a chance. And that's the end of the legal portion of this. So for those of you who just tuned in for Hinault and Cordova, you can go on your merry way and have a wonderful day. Now we're going to talk about Iran again, because Iran is big on my mind. And I know that a lot of my audience doesn't like it. My viewership numbers are way down on Iran videos, but I'm not monetized, so I really don't care. I talk about what I want to talk about. And I also want to preface a lot of this with, I do all these videos in one take. I look at the news in the morning. You know, I have some recollection of the news that I saw the night before. And I come to work and I sit in my car, I hit record, and it's one and done. I mean, I have no production values other than putting this to block the morning sun. This visor is my only production value. So, you know, this is what you get. Yesterday, apparently, I made a mistake and said that the U.S. was importing between 5 and 10 billion barrels of oil and gas products a day. Gasoline, like not natural gas, but like petroleum products. And people are like, oh, it's million. Oh, well, you're wrong. We could just disregard everything you said. Well, the U.S. is an importer of oil. That is my point. We are going to be affected by oil prices. That is my point. In addition, a oil company in the U.S. producing oil in the U.S., all of them are multinational corporations. They might have their headquarters in the U.S., but they're all multinational corporations, and they're going to sell their product to the highest bidder. If they can get $20 more per barrel by sending it to bumfuck nowhere, they're going to do that. Or they're just going to raise their prices by $20 a barrel and say, well, either you buy it at this price or they'll buy it at this price, and we'll buy it at this price. So it's going to affect us. That is the net sum total. For those of you who are thinking that the oil issue isn't a big issue, apparently today, the International Energy Agency, whatever, I mean, I might get that name a little bit wrong, but Google it. They're planning on meeting today to authorize the release of 300 to 400 million barrels from the strategic oil reserves of various member nations. They think it's a problem. For the Trump-tard who thinks that we're cutting off China from oil, it came out today that there were about 12 million barrels, roughly give or take, of oil exported through the Strait of Hormuz since this war began. And those were all headed to China. So apparently it's not hurting China. Sorry, Trump-tard. But whatever this, this weird obsession with China and Russia that the neocons or whoever have, I don't understand it. Why we're bleeding our country dry to maintain some fiction that we have some military hostility between Russia and China, I don't know. They're bad people. Whatever, dude. It doesn't really make any sense to me. So, sorry, Trump-tard, BTFO. Not only did China import a massive shit ton of oil in the first 2 months of this year prior to this war starting, but they're still getting oil from the Middle East. And I am 100% positive that Russia is building extra pipelines to supply China. In addition, they could supply China via sea from their Pacific ports. China's going to get their oil. China's going to get their oil. They'll probably pay more for it, but they're going to get their oil. So, sorry, BTFO. And in addition, China produces like more than a fifth. They produce like 1/5 of all the goods produced in the world or more, maybe up to like 25% or ish. They produce a lot. So if China has to spend more to produce the goods, the U.S. as a net importer of goods, we're going to pay more for all the goods we get from China. So it's going to affect you still, Trumper. And Trump is looking for a way out. He called Putin the other day, trying to find a solution to Iran. Iran's still like, we don't really give a fuck. We're not negotiating, despite everything that Trump said, and despite the misinterpretation of Pezeshkian, whatever, the president of Iran, who doesn't have a lot of authority. He's one part of a council of 3, and the supreme leader is still the supreme leader. And he's, again, only one of 3, but he said something along the lines of, we don't want to attack our neighbors. I think that was misinterpreted because Iran kept attacking their neighbors. So I think what he was saying is basically that if you're not basically hosting U.S. troops, if you're not allowing attacks on Iran from your territory, we're not going to do it. So anyway, Trump's in a bit of a pickle. I saw, and maybe it was AI generated, maybe not, but I saw propaganda that Trump was putting out that 94% of the U.S. supports this war. That's bullshit. They don't. Part of the Russia-China thing that always intrigues me is, oh, these guys are evil dictators. These guys are evil dictators. They're corrupt. They're this, they're that. I have no idea how the U.S. can, with a straight face, criticize the leaders of other countries when all of our leaders are either pedophiles or they're bought by special interests. Shocking. Our leaders don't do what our citizens want. When you have liberals in power, they don't enact the policies that liberals want. When you have Republicans in power, they don't enact the policy that Republicans want. You get to cast your meaningless vote, and you get someone in power who's going to do what special interest groups and or Israel want. That's what you get. That's what you get every time, all the time. Now, speaking of Israel, I don't blame Jews. Just like I don't blame Americans for what America does, because Americans are against this war, and yet we're at war. Do I blame Americans? No. I blame America, the government. The government's the problem. In Israel, I blame the Israeli government. I did see a U.S. Senator, I want to say Murphy. I could be wrong on that. Double check me. Maybe it invalidates everything I say if I got the guy's name wrong. But what he said was essentially that that this war is Israel's fault. That we're at war because of Israel. I don't think so. It's like if you have a spoiled child who you give everything, and that child says, I want you to beat up this guy because this guy's been bullying me, even if the guy hasn't been bullying him. But that's what the kid says. You're the adult. You can go beat up that kid, but you can't blame your child because you are the adult. You're in control. You get to say what you do. The U.S. is in control of the U.S. I understand that there are a lot of special interest groups. I understand there's a lot of money from AIPAC. I understand there's a lot of money from AIPAC adjacent things. But the U.S. is responsible for what the U.S. does. Plain and simple. The U.S. chose to go to war. The U.S. chose, responding to a comment from another commentator, to put troops in Beirut in 1983 that were attacked by an Iranian. I guess Iran is responsible for every action of every single citizen, regardless of where it happens in the world. So it's obviously Iran's fault. But to respond to that, we were there because Israel wanted us there. If Israel didn't want us there, we wouldn't be there. Not because we couldn't be there over Israel's objection, but we choose to do what Israel wants. That's why we were there. That attack on us is not somehow like Iran is going across the country or across the world to come get us. We were there doing shit that, let's just arguendo say, Iran didn't like. Why were we there? It's not in our best interest. I don't really care. But we were there, not in the U.S.'s best interest, ostensibly to protect the Lebanese, but in reality, we were there as targets to hope that we would get attacked so that we would go to war with Lebanon and Israel could get more land. I mean, I don't think it's controversial now that Israel wants to expand its borders, and I don't blame them. They're a nation. They want to expand their borders. Congratulations. Pretty much every nation ever has wanted to expand its borders. The U.S. wanted to expand its borders. We started off very small. We ended up with most of the continent. Why? We wanted to expand our borders. Does that make us bad? No. Did it displace or drive out various other nations? Like we took a bunch of land from Mexico by force. Doesn't make us bad. No, that's what nations do. Israel isn't bad for doing that. You can disagree. You know, I used to play this game called Europa Universalis 4. It's a geopolitical grand strategy game set in like the 1440s through like 1820. And one of the popular tactics that you would do if you were playing a small nation is you would get an alliance with one of the big powers like the Ottomans or Austria or France or Great Britain. You'd get this alliance, and then you would build up political favors, and then you would use them to crush your enemies. You would take all your enemies' land. You would get bigger and stronger until the point where you got big and strong enough that you would be able to take on your former ally and take their land. It's what you do. Like, it's what you do. Israel doesn't have the military to accomplish the goals they want. They're getting us to do it for them. Congratulations, great. You know, awesome sauce. I don't blame Jews for it. I blame Israel for it. But blame is kind of a harsh word. It's like, I don't really care. The next point is someone said that we're technically not at war. We're not at war. This isn't a war with Iran. Well, Iran thinks it's a war. And I want to point out that Russia's intervention in the Ukraine conflict and then having those territories agree to join the Russian Federation, that's a special military operation, right? Vietnam was a police action. I think Korea was a police action too. But they're wars. They're wars except for a signed declaration of war by Congress. Every other way, it's a war. And North Korea thought we were at war. North Vietnam thought we were at war. Ukraine thinks they're at war with Russia. Iran thinks they're at war with the U.S. The signed piece of paper is a technicality that doesn't really mean anything, because Congress has given up its right to control when and how the U.S. goes to war to the president. Because why not? Because why not? Constitution, who needs it? We can just delegate our authority to go to war to the president. Speaking of which, the guy who brought up Beirut and then accused me of saying, oh, it's the Jews, asked me if Israel has a right to exist. I don't think any nation has a right to exist. You'd have to define what a right is. Throughout history, nations have had a right to exist as long as they have had the ability to defend their right to exist. In that sense, Israel has a right to exist. But that's it. If a bigger, stronger nation, Israel, they don't have a right to exist anymore. In fact, they don't exist. I personally don't understand rights except as privileges given by a authority, a power. So you have privileges in the U.S. We call them rights, but you have privileges in the U.S. because the U.S. government enforces, or the state government enforces those privileges, or doesn't enforce it when you do something, if that makes sense. You only have rights, as we like to call them, or privileges, as far as they can be enforced. People like to say, oh, you have God-given rights. Well, like, God isn't down here enforcing them. I don't think you actually have God-given rights. I don't see it in the Bible. These are philosophical inventions, creations out of someone's imagination, and no one enforces them unless the government does, or you do. I mean, if you enforce your right, then I guess you had that right. But it's just power. It's just power. It all boils down to force. So does Israel have a right to exist? Well, as long as Israel can enforce its right to exist, it does. At the point where it can't enforce its right to exist through its own power or through the power of its allies, and I'm using allies in scare quotes because, again, we will come to Israel's defense, but Israel has no obligation in law or in fact to come to our defense. And they don't. So, But as long as Israel can enforce it through their own power or through the actions of others, there you go. They have a right. But I mean, I don't know what you're going to do with that. I mean, I'm not saying that they should exist or they shouldn't exist. Again, I don't fucking care. Like, and then in my comments, all these pro-Israel people like to say, oh, but what about October 7th? What about this? What about that? Israel isn't chanting death to America. It's only the Muslims. Well, I don't really care if someone chants death to America. I mean, there's reasons why. There's reasons why. Now, you might not agree with those reasons, but the Palestinians think they have a valid grievance against the Israelis. They think they have a valid reason. You can disagree, but you're not changing their minds. The Israelis think they have a valid grievance against the Palestinians. Again, you can disagree, but you're not changing the Israelis' minds. Russia thought it had a valid grievance against Ukraine. You can disagree, doesn't change Russia's mind. And at the end of the day, morality is only as good as it can be enforced. Rights are only good as so far as they can be enforced. Russia is going to take what Russia wants from Ukraine. They're going to do it. Nothing's going to stop them. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. At the current rate, Israel is going to take what Israel wants. Again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, unless, for whatever reason, the U.S. stops backing them. If the U.S. stops backing them, I am 55 to 60% sure that the other Western nations will follow suit and stop backing them. Israel's very unpopular. Can't imagine why. So, Saudi Arabia confirmed not only did they catch a Mossad cell trying to do sabotage, but also they determined that the initial drone strikes that hit their oil production facilities were from Israel. In the middle of a war, Israel's attacking its allies. Or they're attacking the people who are letting the U.S. operate from their territory to attack Israel's enemy. You can't make this shit up. So anyway, I think that wraps up everything I wanted to say about this. Just for the record, despite Trump's bloviations, Iran has shown no interest in diplomatic negotiations, zero. I mean, maybe Putin will be able to pull a miracle out of his ass and get him to come to the table and talk. Maybe. I don't particularly see it happening. We've blown up their Navy, but I saw a video this morning of they have at least one underground naval base that has like fast attack boats, which are small. I mean, they're not a threat to the U.S. Navy, but they have anti-ship missiles in there. They have mines in there. And again, the U.S. Navy is probably safe because the U.S. Navy is staying pretty far away from Iran, but that's there. There's a reason why ships that aren't going to China can't cross through the strait without getting attacked and damaged. And I mean, they're not doing it. There's a reason why, and it's because Iran is still in control of the strait. And there is no evidence to suggest that Iran is not in control of that strait. And Trump is he's just full of shit when he says, oh yeah, ships can cross. Oh yeah, the U.S. Navy is going to escort them through. That's a kill zone. U.S. Navy isn't going to go in there. Well, I hope they aren't going to go in there. I mean, despite my negative outlook on this war, I don't want U.S. troops to die. I don't want U.S. treasure to be spent. I don't want U.S. ships to be sunk. All of this costs America. All of it does. I don't want that. I'm against this war because there's no out for us. I saw a report from somebody who apparently was in a briefing who went through various aspects of it. He couldn't divulge the top secret stuff, but he said basically the U.S., our goal is not denuclearization. Our goal is not regime change. Our goal is apparently just to get rid of the missiles and the missile production facilities. And we have no plan on what to do if we manage to get rid of the missiles and the missile production facilities. I don't believe that we've done pretty much squat to their ability to launch missiles. They're looking at this as a long war. They're looking at Iran, apparently, according to the statements that are being made by their top diplomats and the head of the IRGC, they're looking at this as like a 10-year war. they are looking at this long term. And you're like, oh, they're not launching wave after wave after wave. Well, they are. I mean, they're small waves, but they want this to last. They're launching like 15-year-old missiles, old generation stuff, depleting air defenses. Every time they launch one of these old missiles, it costs, maybe $500,000 or less. I'm just guessing there. But we're launching interceptors that cost millions, right? So multiple interceptors that cost millions. I guess they hit a power plant in Israel and the power went out. I did see a video of it. I saw the power going out. So I mean that's scary. They've been targeting one of the major power plants in Israel, and Israel survives on desalination plants, and desalination plants take a lot of energy, and if Israel loses energy, that's a real problem. And there are three groups of people I really feel bad in this. I feel bad for the Iranians, I feel bad for the Israelis, and I feel bad for the US citizens, because we are the ones who are suffering. Our governments are doing just fine. I guess technically maybe the Iran government, having to replace their supreme leader, isn't doing as awesome sauce as the others. But like, it's the people who suffer. The Israeli people. I mean, I've seen videos of like Tel Aviv where there's sections that look like Gaza now. There's horrible damage being done to the civilian infrastructure in Iran. It's not affecting their ability to fight. It's not affecting their military infrastructure in any meaningful way. Again, getting rid of their navy. It's a token navy. Who cares? They weren't doing anything with their navy. They're doing stuff with missiles, and we're not getting rid of the missiles. And these missiles are in underground missile cities. They call them missile cities, bro. Like what are we doing? Anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.